Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of litFestx. We are joined with Sudhanshu Palsule from UK. Uh, Most of you would know him, students of leadership, management, and business. But for the ones who don't, Sudhanshu is currently a fellow at the University of Cambridge, and he also teaches at Duke Corporate Education. He's an advisor to the United Nations and a CEO advisor to many leading businessmen and CEOs. He works as a thinker and educator in the fields of transformative leadership. Last year, he released his book, The Social Leader, which is doing very well. Sudhanshu, welcome and great to have you on litFestx.
Thank you, Kumar. It's a pleasure. As I mentioned to you the other day, this is an idea whose time has come. And in fact, one of the themes I pick up in The Social Leader is how technology is really going to transform the way in which we humanize one another by actually getting back in touch with each other. So it's a very strange kind of juxtaposition. On the one hand, we go ahead technologically, we're using digital platforms. On the other hand, it's lending to a more humanizing process. And here it is, you and I are sitting and talking to anyone who wishes to listen in. This is a revolution. Fantastic. Great job, Kumar.
Thanks, Sudhanshu. So, since you mentioned an element of the book, let's dive straight in. You know, give me in a broad sense, what is the sort of the essence of the social leader? I mean, are we talking about the social aspects of leadership, or are you talking about some of the other areas where leaders really need to be able to look at society as well? So give us a good essence of it.
Thank you. So Kumar, it's a bit like this. It actually is about both things that you mentioned. If you take a look at some of the big disruptions that have taken place in human history, they've all had to do in one way or the other with information and knowledge. Gutenberg's invention of the printing press in the 15th century caused a major disruption in the way, and history was never the same again. Books could be published and printed for the first time, and the common man, the common woman had access to knowledge and information for the first time. I think what happened in 1991 with the internet going commercial was another huge disruption, and we are just about starting to see the first ripples of that happening today. And for example, you and I sitting and talking this way is actually just part of that context where, as I mentioned in my book, what we had come to be, we'd come to regard as the received word, where information, knowledge was all handed down from above by someone in authority or someone who controlled it, right? And it's suddenly now released, and it's become a participated word. It's no longer the received word, but a participated word. So what we talk about in this book is that there are some major causes for this happening. One is globalization, two is digital technology, third one, millennial demographic. I mean, don't forget that Google turns 18 next year, which means the average 18-year-old running around the planet next year will have no idea of a world where you and I did not have access to knowledge. And the fourth aspect, which I pick up, is about how more and more information is now starting to get created socially than in the official space. And this means that the democratization of knowledge, the banishment of the received word is going to be complete. And you're seeing that happening already. I mean, if you take a look at what is happening in cases where you have had organizations and industries that have tried to hold on to their knowledge and that are governed by strict laws of IP and so on, are finding it difficult. There are companies that are starting to give away their knowledge because that's how they build their larger ecosystems. That's starting to happen. At the level of nations and societies, you see how control is being taken back again by people. So it's all that. And to answer your question with one last point on it, it also means that as leaders, we have a huge responsibility today. Issues of transparency, visibility, authenticity are starting to come back all over again. We judge our leaders more and more today by their authenticity and not just by what they say. And these are all the things that we managed to pick up in the social leader, saying leading in the 21st century is going to be a very different ballgame than what we've known so far. And we better learn that quick, because disruptions are happening way too quickly.
You touched upon something very interesting in terms of the way knowledge used to be created and sort of handed down, vis-a-vis the almost amorphous nature of the knowledge body today. It is being co-created real time by just about everyone and anyone, and accessible to just about everyone and anyone. In that sort of a context, do you think the role of the leader is really going to be questioned? I mean, not just leadership styles, but what is the reason of existence of a leader in this environment?
Well, that's a fabulous question, Kumar. That's a fabulous question. In fact, I've spent the last few years really thinking about this question, and some of it went into that book, and some of it is coming up in another book I'm writing right now. So there are two things I'd like to talk about. One being that the role of the expert leader is over. But that actually started happening in the 90s itself. When knowledge and information became more and more commoditized, we saw that was happening more and more. So that kind of has gone away. But the one thing that we have hung on to even now, which is actually a remnant of more than 200 years now, is the leader as the heroic figure. In leadership theory, we used to call it the great man theory. And remember, it's always a great man. There's a huge masculine element to that whole thing. And don't forget that our earliest models of leadership did come from the military, right? So we still talk about the general leading his troops, or we say, let's go into the war room. Are your troops ready behind you? We've got used to all these metaphors and ways of talking. And I'm finding that more and more, these are becoming redundant in the 21st century. So in some of the research that we did for the book, we came up with some very interesting insights. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to be authentic is becoming one of the greatest characteristics of a great leader in the 21st century. The second one is the ability to inspire people. And I'm talking of real inspiration, not the inspiration that you hear from a political figure. It's not rhetoric. It's genuine inspiration that comes from here. The third thing that came up quite sharply, Kumar, is purpose is coming back as an important medium of communication all over again. Do we stand for something? Do we have a larger purpose than just making money for our shareholders? If you're talking about private business, if you're talking about government, if you're talking of society, again, the role of purpose is coming back again. And lastly, and this is going to be the most significant thing, which I think answers your question, the whole idea of the leader leading his troops is disappearing. It's about how I can work with the people around me and with me in order to create something that is meaningful, not just for us, but also for the society or the community that we are serving, is starting to become more and more critical. It really doesn't matter how big I am, how important I am, what my status is. And this is something I'm seeing as a major shift that's taking place in the way we view leadership models.
You mentioned authenticity and inspiration. I think obviously these are qualities in a leader which have been expected for centuries and will continue to be expected as areas of paramount importance from people who observe these leaders, or the leaders expectation that they would have such followers. But given the complexity that you just spoke about earlier in the discussion, in terms of millennials, in terms of technology, in terms of information, what do you think is, really going to happen in this complex environment? Can we really then look up to singular leadership figures, or is there a new emerging model?
Great. Again, another fabulous question. I think it's both. I think we are starting to see the emergence of a new model. we still don't have the vocabulary to describe it because, as I said, our vocabulary has got so conditioned by the military industrial complex that that we've got used to. We will have to come up with new terms. And I think the role of women is something that we are starting to look at quite seriously. A friend of mine at MIT has just completed some research in which that becomes a significant part of group intelligence, the number of women we have. It also is about what are the qualities the leader is actually bringing into the context that he or she is operating in. So given all that, Kumar, the most important thing we got to remember is that there is no place for a leader to hide anymore. That is the biggest challenge that most leaders are facing. They're out there. It's 24/7. Social media is rife. The way in which visibility and transparency are fast becoming the most important characteristics of my leadership portfolio are just going to change the way I have to come across to the others. So authenticity and all these qualities, we've always admired them for hundreds of years. You're absolutely right. But they have just got very, very critical. The other thing I'd like to quickly bring up is you talk about complexity, and there's no doubt that the world is becoming a more complex place. And as you've heard me say before, complexity is not the opposite of simplicity. It's the opposite of linearity, which means, one thing at a time, cause and effect. And I'm finding more and more that the ability to think differently is going to become the hallmark of the 21st century leader. We cannot think the way we have thought before. We have to learn new tools of thinking. I just wanted to add that to what you said, Kumar.
Absolutely, you're very right that the new ways of thinking and new tools will have to be devised, or as you mentioned, the lexicon will have to expand as far as leadership and thinking around management is concerned. So coming back to your book, when you say the social leader, what are some of the sort of new words in the lexicon or new ideas that you have described in the book?
Well, one of the things we attempted to do, the concept doesn't translate universally, so there's a little bit of a limitation in this, but we tried to replace the general with the concept of a mayor. A mayor. The thing is, in places like India, the mayor is not really a position of decisive power. But if you take it in the US context where we published the book, the mayor has a very interesting role in the sense she or he doesn't have the full executive powers of the president, for example, but has an incredible power when it comes to working along with local networks, getting decisions passed at the local level, and actually able to mobilize vast amounts of resources. Now, the reason why we approach the term mayor is because the mayor is part of a social network. He or she is part of a community. And these are the new concepts we are now starting to work with. What does it mean to lead from within a community rather than lead from the front? You see what I mean? What does it mean for a mayor to be able to influence his or her constituents who may not be in agreement with him or her? So the ability to actually work with people who do not agree with you is fast becoming a very, very important leadership competence. Because in the old model, because of the whole hierarchical structure and the fact that we operated with the received word, I had no choice but to say yes to anyone that came from the above. Now, it doesn't work anymore. I can push back. I have a voice. I have the ability to use social media the way I want to. If I have an opinion, I can put it out there. And so if you're my leader, you will have to approach me with a very different perspective. So I think to answer your question, we played with that term. We played with the term of community. We played with the word of social networks. So these are some of the things we are starting to develop now. And this is still early research. And I'm hoping that over the next 5 to 6 years, more people join in and we come up with a new way of approaching leadership for the 21st century.
Right. I like your approach when you mentioned that it is no longer about executive decision-making powers, right? So it's not so much about power, it's about it's the ability to work with people irrespective of their opinion versus yours, and simply getting things done, right? In that sort of a context, how do you see the workings of large multinationals, transnational, large conglomerates, because they currently obviously have a very direct lineage of power and reporting, and that's how things get done. And increasingly, as these organizations find themselves in environments such as what you described, how do you think that's going to play out?
uh, this question gives me sleepless nights. You go back to the story of what happened when United Airlines refused to pay compensation to a young musician whose guitar had been broken while in transit, and it was clearly the airline's responsibility. But because this young man was traveling economy class and clearly had no financial clout, they just sent him from pillar to post for something like 8 months. And at the end of which he got so fed up. And what does a young man do who is a musician when he gets fed up? He wrote a song and he put it up on YouTube. And within 48 hours, that song had gone viral, millions and millions of hits. And for the first time, Kumar, it hit a large corporation. The share price of United Airlines tumbled down because of a young man's ability to put up a song on YouTube. This was the first time this happened. After that, there have been many, many such cases where corporations are finding it more and more difficult to adjust to this new space we are in right now, where a common human being can actually use the power of social media to actually put something out there. Now, this is just the start, right? The other question we've got to ask is, have corporations that have been around for a long time, that are huge, the big conglomerates, the large companies, are they really going to find it easy to survive in a more very, very agile 21st century workplace? I'm starting to get massive concerns about it. I consult a lot to the pharmaceutical industry, for example. And the whole healthcare industry is going to go through a massive disruption over the next few years. How does a gigantic corporation that has been used to 20th century mechanistic industrial workings, how does it cope with that? Now, when there are divided camps on this, colleagues of mine at Cambridge say, well, they are always going to be there because they have the financial muscle. Whereas some of us are starting to say, well, financial muscle it's relative. You have forces of agility, forces of needing to adapt in a complex situation where you don't know what the answers are. They are starting to become more and more important. So the jury is out on that one. My personal opinion, I think we're going to see the death of some very important large corporations in the next 10 to 15 years. But there are dissenting voices to that. So I don't know what you think, but this is something clearly that I'm feeling more and more certain about.
Right. I just hope that I don't own stock in any one of those.
No.
Right. So, I think it's a good time to bring in a couple of questions which are coming to us from social media, from the viewers who are watching right now. I'm going to read out one or two, and let's see. So, this one says, what are the traits of a good leader? I think social has always been an integral part. What new additions do you see in it?
Great question. So, in fact, this is something that I'm working on right now. I'm starting to see the ability to develop what I call relationality between the leader and the context, the community, the people that he or she is working with. I'm starting to find that becoming the most critical factor in how I or you lead. You see, let's spend just a minute on this, Kumar. We've got used to the notion that the individual is the center of everything. In fact, we've got used to this atomistic view of the individual as a center that comes from major Western schools of philosophy that go back a long time ago. And this is starting to get really massively challenged. The question is, do I exist as an individual first, and then I have relationships with the others? or am I defined through my relationships? And that is the critical factor. So you take a look at authenticity. What is authenticity? My authenticity reveals itself in my relationship. On my own, sitting in my room up here, whether I'm authentic or not is not the big deal. Is my relationship authentic? So coming back to your question, I think the ability to develop and nurture authentic relationships, whether it's with my coworkers, my colleagues, my bosses, my customers, my clients, that to me is going to become the number one criteria. And by the way, this sounds easier than it is. To be genuinely authentic is one of the most difficult things. It's a learning of a lifetime. And that's what I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll take one last question. It says, how do you see social making leaders improve and making society better in return? So just paraphrasing, I assume he's talking about social media, making leaders improve and making society better in return.
So again, I think I said this once, but it's a great question, so I'll repeat it one more time. There is no place to hide. This is fast becoming a truth of our time. And therefore, what social media and the entire social enterprise out there is doing is it is forcing me to take a long, hard look at myself as a leader, for example, and begin to understand how I need to come across to you. You see, at the end of the day, for me, leadership is a very simple thing. It's not easy, but it's simple. It's about two things. It's about who you are and how you come across. And it's always been like that. What social media is doing is it's making the light shine on those two things brighter than ever before. We are out there in the open. We have no place to hide. And we have no choice but to be authentic, humble, purposeful, transparent, and inspire the people that we lead to do the things that we want them to achieve. There is no place to hide. I think that's the message that I'd like to bring in strongly over here, Kumar.
That's a great message, Sudhanshu, and very articulately put. On that note, I'd like to call this session to an end. I know we are just just going over time a little, but thank you so much and for joining in. It's like you mentioned. It's fantastic that you're in the UK. I'm here in Mumbai. We're discussing your book, which was launched in the US last year, discussing global leadership for a global audience. And thank you so much for making it happen.
Thank you, Kumar. And once again, this is an amazing intervention on your part, and this is going to change the way things are going to be done from here onwards. So thank you, and thanks for the invitation.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.